The city was quiet. Too quiet. San Francisco's air carried tension like static before a lightning strike. A bank robbery had left one officer wounded and a woman clinging to life. And then came him, Inspector Harry Callahan, gun in hand, eyes narrowed like a predator locked onto prey. Clint Eastwood's character walked toward the suspect like death itself was wearing a badge. The criminal, bleeding but defiant, reached for his weapon. And then, like thunder wrapped in gravel, Harry spoke. "I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots, or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement I kind of lost track myself. But being this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?" For a moment, the world stood still. The man hesitated. That's all Harry needed. The silence after the insult was more explosive than gunfire. It wasn't just a threat. It was a psychological beatdown. The criminal dropped the gun. The crowd behind the police line didn't cheer. They just stared, half in awe, half in fear. That was the power of Eastwood. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He warned, and the world listened. It was sweltering in the city, the kind of day where heat clung to skin and tempers frayed like old rope. In Magnum Force, Clint Eastwood's Inspector Harry Callahan faced not only criminals, but a deeper rot, a group of rogue officers who had taken the law into their own hands. They weren't punks in the street. They were men in uniform, armed with justice and arrogance. They believed they could clean the city by becoming judge, jury, and executioner. But to Harry, law wasn't about revenge. It was about control, principle, and yes, limitation. When one of the rogue cops confronted him, posturing like a cowboy drunk on power, Harry didn't raise his gun first. He raised his voice, calm, low, surgical. A man's got to know his limitations. It wasn't just a jab. It was a mirror held up to someone who had lost the plot. The silence afterward was cutting. The rogue cop blinked, unsure whether to fire or fold. The insult didn't come from rage. It came from experience. It came from a man who had walked through blood, watched good friends die, and seen what happens when power goes unchecked. And that's what made it hurt more. The scene didn't erupt in gunfire, not yet. It simmered, heavy with unspoken consequences. That line stayed with the audience, not because it was loud, but because it was true. Eastwood didn't just shut his opponent down, he dismantled his entire belief system with one sentence. As the camera lingered on Harry's face, weathered and unmoved, viewers didn't see a man gloating. They saw a man warning the world. Greatness without humility is just destruction waiting to happen. The dust swirled around them like ghosts on the plains. In The Outlaw, Josie Wales, Clint Eastwood's character, wasn't just a gunman. He was a man hollowed out by war, loss, and betrayal. He rode not for glory, but survival. And when young bounty hunters came chasing him through the wilderness, greedy, overconfident, and green with ignorance, they didn't know they were walking into a storm. One boy, in particular, not much older than 20, tried to stand tall in front of Josie Wales. Dressed like a dime novel hero, he barked out a threat with his shaky voice. "I'm gonna kill you, mister. I got a right." Eastwood didn't flinch. He didn't even look at him at first. He just stared into the horizon, almost bored. Then, slowly turning his steely eyes toward the boy, he said it, quietly, but with words that hit harder than a bullet. "Dyin' ain't much of a living, boy." Time seemed to freeze. The wind stopped. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. It was a line so simple, so calm, that it shattered the bravado in an instant. The boy, suddenly aware of how small he was in front of this man, this legend, lowered his gun. He wasn't a killer. He was a kid playing dress-up in a world that didn't care. Eastwood's delivery didn't just sting, it stripped. It peeled away the layers of fantasy and pride, exposing fear and inexperience underneath. That's what made it unforgettable. The genius of this insult wasn't in its cruelty, but its truth. It was a warning, cloaked in philosophy, a brutal kindness from a man who'd seen too many young fools bleed out in the dirt. And the viewers, they felt the weight of it. Some in the audience even whispered the line under their breath, as if to taste its wisdom. It was an insult, but it was also a lesson. That's Clint Eastwood. He doesn't just defeat you, he makes you understand why you never should have tried. There are moments in cinema when time feels like it slows down, not because of explosions or gunfire, but because of words. Few actors deliver those moments like Clint Eastwood. In Magnum Force, 1973, Eastwood returns as the iconic Inspector Harry Callahan, a man already known for delivering cold justice and even colder one-liners. But this time, he wasn't up against just criminals. He was up against fellow officers, rogue cops who had abandoned the law for their own brand of execution-style justice. By the final act, Harry Callahan had uncovered the truth. The men who were supposed to uphold the law were slaughtering suspects, justifying murder in the name of order. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they were heroes. But Harry, he knew better. After a tense confrontation, one of the officers, arrogant, decorated, and deadly, mocked Callahan. He believed Callahan was too soft, too limited, unwilling to go the extra mile to clean up the city. That's when Clint delivered it. Calm, measured, like a man reading your obituary before you've hit the ground. A man's got to know his limitations. And just like that, the tone shifted. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration, etched into granite, soaked in steel. The line didn't just silence the room. It crushed the ego of the man it was aimed at. The audience could feel the weight behind it. Harry Callahan wasn't questioning the rogue officer's courage. He was exposing his blind arrogance. The beauty of that insult was in its restraint. It was like a scalpel, not a hammer. A warning, a judgment, and a final verdict all packed into one chilling sentence. What made it hit harder was that Harry Callahan wasn't boasting. He was simply stating a universal truth, that in a world full of men trying to be gods, the most dangerous ones are those who don't know their limits. And Clint didn't blink when he said it. It's the kind of line that has echoed through generations. Police officers, soldiers, everyday citizens, they quote it. Not just because it's cool, but because it's real, because it teaches something about power, ego, and restraint. In that moment, Clint Eastwood didn't just outwit the enemy, he dismantled him, word by word, layer by layer. It was a verbal execution, carried out with surgical precision, and it left the audience with their jaws clenched, whispering to themselves, "Damn, he did it again." If there was ever a moment that stripped away the romanticism of revenge, the illusion of justice, and the very soul of the Western hero, it came in Unforgiven, 1992. This film wasn't just a Western. It was a eulogy to the myth of the Western. And Clint Eastwood wasn't just acting in it. He was rewriting everything we thought we knew about cowboys, morality, and mercy. William Money, once a ruthless killer-turned-farmer, is forced back into violence after years of trying to live a quiet, repentant life. But the death of his friend Ned at the hands of Sheriff Little Bill Daggett, Gene Hackman, brings the storm back. In the saloon, where Ned's tortured body is displayed as a warning, Money walks in like the Grim Reaper himself. The room falls silent. Thunder seems to roll behind his eyes. A shotgun blast tears through the bartender, and all chaos dies in that moment, because everyone knows he's not here to talk. Little Bill, wounded and crawling, looks up at Money with desperation. He tries to appeal to some remaining shred of humanity, to bargain for his life. "I don't deserve this," he pleads, and Clint, standing like judgment itself, doesn't scream. He doesn't rage. He just says it. "Deserves" got nothing to do with it. Those 6 words changed everything. They cut through the bones of every man in that saloon and every viewer in the audience. It was the death of idealism, the end of the noble outlaw. This wasn't justice. It wasn't honor. It was cold reality, and William Money had become something more terrifying than an outlaw. He had become consequence. The line carried the weight of decades, of blood spilled, of promises broken, of redemption never quite reached. It spoke to something darker and truer than most films dared to say. That in the real world, people don't get what they deserve. They get what's coming. It stunned everyone, not just in the film, but in theaters around the world. Viewers didn't cheer. They sat still. They felt something shift. And as Money walked into the rain, vanishing like a ghost into the night, we understood the brilliance of Clint Eastwood. His insults weren't just about making the audience laugh or the enemy squirm. They were tools, weapons, mirrors, sometimes cold, sometimes cutting, always unforgettable. This wasn't just an insult. It was a final blow to the idea that life plays fair. And that's why, decades later, that line still haunts us.